Thanks for joining this episode of the Biometrics Leadership Lab Podcast. Today, my guest is longtime friend and colleague, Charlene Dark. Charlene is currently the Chief Operating Officer of Avania, a medtech industry clinical development partner, and CEO of Summus Advisors, a leadership development firm specializing in executive coaching and leadership team development in the clinical research industry. Charlene has over 30 years of experience blending statistical expertise from NC State University with business acumen from her UNC Chapel Hill MBA. As a certified executive coach, Charlene has dedicated her career to empowering leaders and fostering organizational growth. Colleagues know her as a natural connector, someone who brings diverse minds together to build relationships that last well beyond the boardroom. Outside of work, Charlene enjoys reading, DIY projects, and cheering on the Carolina Hurricanes. She shares her life with a blended family of 4 children and 11 grandchildren. What's she up to now? You'll find out at the end of the episode. Let's get started. Well, Charlene, thanks again for joining me today. And I'm really excited to talk to you and learn more about how your career has developed. For those of you who may not know, Charlene and I go way back, having both started as statisticians. And so I think it's very interesting to think about how you go from being a statistician to really developing a more widespread sphere of influence and moving into executive leadership roles. So Charlene, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Just to talk a little bit about how you started in your career, how did you get started in clinical research?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. It actually happened by accident.
As it does for most people.
As it does for most people. I joined this industry when it was between 11 and 12 years old. So it was in its tween years. So a lot of people had not heard of the CRO industry, much less the clinical research industry. So when I was working on my master's degree, I was a TA in the stats department at NC State and clearly was not making enough money to make ends meet. My husband at the time and I were poor as church mice, and we really needed to get a little more solidified in our financial positions. And I wanted to finish my master's degree. So I was recommended to go to PPD. Never heard of PPD, didn't know what PPD did, but PPD had at that time, which was a comfortable salary. In many cases, probably still would be for some. But I decided to go and interview. What the heck? I needed a job. When I was working on my master's degree, I was planning on going up to New York to be a stock analyst. I was going to go help people make money, and then I was going to make a boatload of money myself. That was my goal in my 20s. So I joined PPD in November of 1994 with a very just an amazing boss. She was an applied geneticist and very, very smart in the world of statistics, and really gave me my start. And so once I got there, 7 days later, she put me on a project and I could see results coming out, and it was amazing. And then she also asked me if I wanted to start working in PK or pharmacokinetics. Not knowing what it was, I said, sure, what is it? And I think that's a lead into how my career has gone as it does, because it's one of those things that is very important, is not to be afraid of something, to try and just jump right in. So I did, and my boss and I founded what is now known as PPD's Phase 1 Biometrics team.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, Josh Baker was there as head of.
He was the president. He was the president at the time. And interestingly enough, with Josh, I had a conversation with him. I was working on another master's degree in leadership. It was an adjunct degree that NC State had just started back then. And I had to interview an executive, and I did. And Josh Baker gave me advice 30 years ago that I carry with me today. And he said, always strive to be the least smartest person in the room. Which is another tenet that I take that has, I think, served me well in how my career has grown.
What do you think is one moment or role that you feel fundamentally shifted your trajectory?
That's a good question. And as I think on it, I don't know that it is a role per se, but I think it is more the managers or the supervisors that I've had that has moved that. And of course, I will go with my first manager, Susan Sproul. Um, I think that the way she led me showed me I could do anything. I think the next big role was with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tom Fortin. He was the CEO of Solaris, not Solaris, but Solaris, which StatProbe eventually bought. He brought me in and trusted me to really grow something from nothing. Um, I would say my next biggest career move, I think that made the most, that really had an impact on me, was while I was at Constella, and I met a leader by the name of Susan Acker Walsh, who eventually became my mentor. Really had a big impact on me, not because of the roles I was doing, but she saw something in me. And that allowed me to continue to grow and believe in myself and grow those things that have nothing to do with analysis of variance or, Wilcoxon rank sum tests or anything like that. It was someone saw those softer skills in me that needed to be cultivated, if you will. And of course, that led me to be able to start the Global Clinical Analytics Group at Clinipace in Arcadia. Retiring after that, I would say being afforded the opportunity and the honor of being the COO of Avania now. And again, it's because of the people. So I don't know if it was a career. It was really getting aligned with people who believed in you and being accountable to show them that you're worthy of being believed in.
That's a theme I hear from several people is, yes, you're going to do the job, but it's the connections you make and the people that you see. And even if you don't find that singular person that you want to model yourself after, you can come across a lot of people you don't want to be like. And so you can develop your style as much from what you're trying to avoid as much as what you're trying to accomplish. But I think that is a really strong message of pay attention to those around you who you can work with in different ways, and just not the ins and outs of the daily grind. And speaking of Clinipace, and I can never say the new name they have, so I won't. And you already mentioned it. You established and grew the Global Clinical Analytics Group. I think you tripled the revenue and did one of my favorite things to do, which is get disparate departments working together, which sounds easier sometimes than it's said. But what do you think are the key principles or practices that you implemented to really allow you to be so successful at Clinipace?
I think the approach I have to any position in leadership or someone looking to me to guide and direct is people first. So about 20 years ago, or 25 years ago now, I was introduced to Jim Collins, Good to Great. And I am a Jim Collins follower when it comes to establishing your organization. If you get the right people in the right seats, doing the job they love, that's your biggest battle. These people are here for the long haul. They're not doing jobs. They're passionate about those things. They're in it together. And you start forming that team dynamic where you start closing down that white space, like I like to say, where folks are so closely aligned and they're so close together that they're going to do whatever they can for each other because it's for the greater good. It's not a 9 to 5, job. When you have that level of trust amongst your team, then you can start looking at the things, which is, the brutal the facts. What's currently happening. It's the brutal facts, and yet still being able to keep that unwavering faith that you can get it to next. You can get it to great, and living by those principles of people first. When people know that you genuinely care about them and you are authentic in who you are being as a leader, that is for me the secret. That has been my core of success. And I think to say that the group at Cadia, formerly Clinipace, that is Global Clinical Analytics, it went through an evolution upon sale 4 or 5 years ago, yet the group itself stayed cohesive, that the company came back around and reestablished it as a pillar. And that group stayed together. and continues to be one of the most successful pieces of the organization. So it really is about not, well, while making your profits and servicing your shareholders or your stakeholders or your PE firm or your founders, whoever that is who has made the investments, you're likely to have more success when you don't let that drive your bottom line, but you find the people who can get behind the cause. And if your cause is something more than money, I think your probability of being successful is higher.
What's your cause?
My cause? My cause is I want to help people. And it's very funny because it is I don't want to say a 180, but I'll give it 145 degrees. I originally wanted to do, I wanted to go and make money for people. And that's how I was going to help people. I was blessed to be able to have the opportunity to join an organization where I could actually see through data that the work I was doing was meaningful. We weren't making people rich. We were saving people's lives. And whatever I'm doing, it has to be, I have to be committed to, and the company has to be part of that philosophy that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We have a greater good that we're working, whether it is saving people's lives, enhancing wellness, whatever that looks like. Being in the medical device, med tech world now, we're still saving lives. It's just, it's a different angle. It's a different lens, the immediacy, right? That we're seeing what we're able to do. It's fascinating and then it's exciting. The software as a medical device, the AI stuff to be able to predict. I mean, we're statisticians. We love predictions. And being able to get in front of these types of things is just, it gives me chills to talk about it because it's meaningful. And at the end of the day, it could save a life.
For me, that has always been one of the driving forces around why I love clinical research, right? I got into it because I didn't have a job and I got out of school, but my mom worked for a pharmaceutical company. So she got them to give me an internship, which went to a career. But, at the end of the day, when you come to work, you're working for the good of patients and making lives better. And when you turn off your computer or put down your phone, you've done something to make a difference for somebody. And I'm sure lots of professions feel that they're making a difference. It's just so reachable for us. And in the biometric space, it's really reachable for us because we're in charge of that patient's data, right? We're like, here's what's happening to that patient. Is it working? What are we doing? And, keeping that center mind can really help steady and ground on the more challenging days. How would you describe your leadership style and how do you think it's evolved over the course of your career?
I love this question. And I think the evolution largely is because of the wonderful leaders that I mentioned earlier. But my leadership style is very simple. I lead through empowerment and I anchor it in accountability. I want to give people space to grow, and I want folks to understand that in order to really own what you're doing, you have to be fully invested. And being fully invested is as much being able to say, look, all the great things I do, equally as important being able to say, I messed up. Because I have a rule of 3. If you're not pushing the boundaries, you're not trying hard enough. So the first time, if it doesn't go right, it's a learning opportunity. We wouldn't know if we didn't try it, right? The second time, if it's the same thing, then I look at it as a mistake. There's something going on. You didn't learn the first time. You repeated your error. And then the third time becomes a performance issue where we've got some challenges, right? I believe in no surprises. So when that second time happens, I believe in fact-based conversations that are steeped in respect. And that is having an adult conversation with an adult. I think sometimes we get so hung up on a hierarchy, boxes and lines on a paper, that we forget we're all adults.
Mm-hmm.
Families, you're running your household, you're leading your church, whatever that it is. That confidence that you have in yourself outside of the workplace should not be diminished because there's lines and boxes, right? But we have to be mutually respectful, and we should be able to have those conversations. So again, my leadership style is really about You want people to try. You want people to feel like they own it. When things are imposed upon people, my experience has been is they don't like that. When you will do this, because I am a very curious person. If someone says you will do this, my first question is why? Does it make sense? What value is it going to add? So being able to say to someone here, this is yours to own, and help them along the way. We don't just throw them out there and leave them along the way. You're there to teach, you're there to coach, you're there to mentor, but you're not there to take over. And it's the hardest thing, right? When we know what needs to be done, it's very hard to sit back and watch. And that is a learned skill. It is not natural.
It is learned, and it's one of the things I brought into like leading leaders, right? It's different when you're and I'm not trying to level people, but if you're a manager and your group is a bunch of individual contributors, it's a different skill set and leadership style than as you go up, and all of a sudden, as you are an executive, you're leading leaders, right? You're leading directors and senior directors and executive directors and vice presidents, and they're running their own teams. And how you free up for them looks different than how you free up, I think, at the IC level. Your phrase of anchoring it in accountability really stands out to me. And how have you approached and changed your style in holding people accountable as you've gone from, managing individual contributors to leading other senior executives?
I think that piece of holding people accountable is really based in that clear communication and the conversations that you have with people. So again, it goes back to no surprises. It's interesting you brought up the difference between an individual contributor, a manager, a director, and a vice president, and then obviously the C-suite. I would say in my experience, Amanda, that one of the hardest shifts, the first shift, and I think it is the hardest shift, is going from an individual contributor to a manager of individual contributors. That is a very hard shift because you're giving up control. And folks who are steeped in excellence and want it done right, that is a very, very difficult thing to do. And I think that we as an industry, and I'm sure it goes beyond clinical research, but we as an industry owe it to these people that we are promoting to give them the necessary tools, training, mentoring, coaching that is necessary for them to be successful. Changing their title and giving them people to report to, that's not the recipe for success. We're not being fair to them. So that's one of the things that as it evolves, I've become very clear that just because you promote somebody, if they look like they can do the job, there's a lot that they still have to learn, and it's incumbent upon me to make sure that they are equipped with the tools, the mentoring, the coaching to be successful.
What you need to be a very strong and high-performing individual contributor is very different than what you need to become a very strong and high-performing manager, because you are no longer just responsible for yourself, you're responsible for all these people. And I love what you said, because I've watched managers come into organizations or get promoted, and there is a very bad tendency to think now that they have manager in their title, they have miraculously been bestowed with all of the knowledge they need to be a manager. And that's actually very rarely the case if you don't have the right processes around that. And so I agree. I think as leaders and as we influence the people reporting up to us, making sure that they've got the right tools and processes and supports in place for this shift becomes really important.
And I'll just add one more thing in there, because this is a piece that's important, and it was taught to me by a friend of mine who happened to report to me. We've been friends for a very long time, and she's very talented, and I wanted to grow her, and I kept putting in her manager roles, and there was nothing I gave her she didn't want to do, except what I forgot to do is ask her, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm putting her in all these roles, and she's doing well because she's just doesn't matter what you give her, she will excel. But she wasn't happy. And I think this is the other piece that we miss is as leaders, because it's the path we took. Not everybody wants to be a manager. Some people want to be a technical expert. And I learned this, and that's one of those evolutions is we have to be very clear that there's a seat for everybody. We don't always need a bunch of managers. And individual contributors and experts don't always make the best managers. This is my favorite, and I saw it happen so often at PPD and then other companies all the way through. We take a brilliant statistician. We had a PhD statistician, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You're awestruck as a statistician. How do you come up with this stuff? It's amazing. I want to be like you when I grow up if I was a statistician. And then we make him head of the department, and things start going south. Well, this should not be a surprise. His talent wasn't in running a business. His talent was in complex models and being able to design very complex studies. So it's that other piece where just because you have a high performer does not automatically translate to being a high performing manager.
And that's where you have to that's where leaders and directors or wherever you are need to understand, how do we make pathways for people to be successful in whatever their calling is? Because if they really don't want to be a manager, and I don't care, what do you want to do, and how do you want to contribute, and how can we make you successful? And I think that there's a big loss when we just say the only way to get ahead is to move into the supervisory pathway, because that is not for everybody, and it's also not what everybody wants to do. Now, you, in addition to being an executive, are also a coach.
And I am
executive coach. And so how do you integrate your coaching approach and your coaching strategies into your leadership style?
That's a great question, because what I've learned, particularly coming out of retirement to take on the COO position, is if I'm not careful, there becomes a conflict of interest. And so sitting in the executive seat, setting the empowering principles, and being clear on the accountability, and being a good mentor to my team as their supervisor, is a different road than being a coach. So Amanda, you being a coach, that coaching is a choice. And the first principle of coaching is you have to be coachable. And while some people understand the requirements of being in a role within my organization, I have to take care that I don't step over into that coaching role that they didn't ask to be coached on. So how I integrate that is, first of all, if I see an opportunity, I assess it. Would I be a good coach? So I am actively coaching someone in our organization that doesn't report to me. And so I have no problem doing that. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of people who are working with me who I used to coach. So that one integrates pretty nicely. It's being respectful of those who may not want to, and those who may not want to, where I see opportunity, the first thing I do is ask for permission.
And it's a fine line, and it's really nice to hear you talking about it and acknowledging it, right? Because a coach, a boss, a mentor, these are all different people in your professional sphere who all have different roles, and how you relate to each of them becomes very different. And so there can be principles of coaching that go into your leadership style and how maybe you navigate your team. But then the act of coaching of a direct report becomes very challenging, because it's a different relationship than a boss employee, regardless of the levels that people are at. I've successfully coached people who were skip leveled or adjacent, yes, in the context of a role, but it is a little bit different to navigate your direct reports.
It is. And you ask about what things about my coaching style have I integrated. And I think one of the things that I can say that I do, and I think whether you're a coach, a parent, an executive, an individual contributor, we as a society need to learn to listen more, right? And active listening is what I practice in almost every conversation I have, just to make sure that Well, for me, that I have a clear understanding, more importantly, the person who has come to me to have a conversation feels like they've been heard, and I am digging in a coaching practice to make sure that we get to the topic, the real topic that we want to talk about. Because a lot of times when people come to me, there's emotion, usually negative emotion around, or nervous emotion around this, and so we have to get through that, so I can help them think through, what are we actually talking about here.
And there's the piece of what somebody says they want to talk about or want to work through is probably almost never the actual issue that needs to be worked through. And nothing digs through that like some active listening and some additional questions. We were talking about individual contributors and growing, but if you have individual contributors who want to grow and develop a more leadership role and think more about becoming more strategic within a company, what advice would you give to today's like lead statistician who really wants to grow and evolve their career into a more leadership role?
Another great question, and I'm actually working through this with one of my direct reports, who happens to be the director of biostatistics, who is working through what does she want to do. So while she's not an individual contributor, when we met a year ago, she was very keen on wanting to be still steeped in the world of statistics, right? And she didn't want to lose that. And I get that. That was a very hard departure for me when I had to make that decision. So we're working through that right now. And again, it goes to a lot of questions and a lot of, when you wake up in the morning, write down your ideal day as pick a role. As a man, what does that look like? How much time are you spending? What are you doing with these people? Are you enjoying this kind of work? Your day is going to go by and you didn't do any programming and you didn't do any analysis plans. Are you going to be okay with that? So it's a matter of helping folks walk through, because while you think you may be a great manager or you think you want to be in leadership, it's helping people understand all the things that leadership is and all the things that leadership isn't.
I think that is a great comment, because as titles increase, people think they know what we're doing, or that these senior leaders and executives are doing. I'm not always so sure that they do. I saw this, by the way, if you never read the clinical research Reddit on Reddit, it's fascinating sometimes.
Okay.
It's somebody that's like, I'm going to do a show that's called Ripped from Reddit, and we're going to talk about all the stuff there. It's very CRA focused though, so there is that. But I think somebody posted this job. They're like, people who are VP levels, like and above, what are you doing all day? And because I think there's a perception that you're just sitting back, drinking your coffee, or choking through emails, or telling people what to do. And the email part is probably true, because the email never stops. But there was a lot of people who are like, I talk to clients so that you don't have to. I get yelled at so you don't have to. I'm solving problems so things go better for you. I'm working through, a backlog of issues to keep people moving forward. And it was very eye-opening to me, because they're like, oh yeah, they are describing my job perfectly. I don't know that people really always understand what it looks like as you go up. And it's not to say those aren't interesting things to do. It's just helping people have their eyes open. And like, if you want to move into a leadership role, what is it you want to achieve? What are you looking to do? And then find the role and the pathway that fits what you actually want to do.
Right. And I think you said it earlier, Amanda, right before we got on the podcast, is I think people too often equate the title with the respect. They're thinking about, how do I promote? How do I get to next? How do I make more money, be more respectful, be seen in my organization, whatever those it's are that is driving them. And I don't know if folks take the time to sit down and go, okay, do I even know what that job is about? Because as I tell people, I am a statistician. I have a degree on the wall that says I am. I am the last person that you're going to want to give an analysis plan to. I can do it. Uh, I may retire by the time I get through it, but I don't do that work anymore. I wake up every morning thinking about how do I make the lives of the team that has trusted me to lead them easier. They want innovation. We want, our clients want the highest caliber of quality and delivery. I wake up every day wondering, what do I have to do today to make sure that 226 people and counting who are relying on me to make sure that they are fulfilled in their role, that they have opportunity for growth, whatever that looks like, and that we are putting them first in a way that translates to them agreeing as such. That's my job. Notice that nothing to do with moving a data point, doing an analysis, reading a monitoring report, doing anything with safety. It had nothing to do with that. The farther up you go, the less it is about the what you do, and it's about with whom you're working, who's going to do that. And I do believe you need to be a successful leader. I think you have to have that people first mentality, because those people are trusting you to do for them. You're their voice, you're their representative, if you will. And as I like to tell people, on a day-to-day basis, if I had a printed out org chart, it is flipped upside down to remind me every single day that if it's not for all those people, I don't have a job.
And when you hear people talk about who their best line manager are, who their best leader is, it's people who are making things better for them and heard their messaging. At some point it becomes challenging because as you go through, you're working for the good of the business as well as, instead of in the business or in the day to day. So that is a harder line to walk. But ultimately, you are working to make things better for patients, but the team that's working to make things better for patients. And
Right.
it is what are you doing to help them, and what are you doing to solve their problems? I think it's very interesting to say, like, I'm like you, like I think I would cry if somebody told me to write an analysis plan. I mean, I don't even think the methodology is the same as the methodology that we use when we're doing it, right? I mean, we programmed our own data sets, which were nothing to do with CDISC.
Exactly.
And, estimands were, not even a word yet. And so I wouldn't want to do it, but there's something to be said about understanding the pains and the struggle and the activities that people are doing on a day-to-day basis, and how you can help what's going on in their world. And I have this list of mantras that I sometimes go back to, but one of my favorite is winning is contagious. And when I help others win, I win too. And as a leader, like, that's what you're doing. You're helping people win, and you're making things better for them. And that for me is where a leader, or, regardless of what level you're at, is really making a difference for their team, because it's about helping them succeed more than how you're looking, to somebody else within the organization. It's how is my team looking?
And you brought up something very important around making sure you're taking care of people, because taking care of people does not automatically equate to giving them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
There are often times that they're going to ask for something and they're just not going to get it. People want to be heard. And we as leaders should adopt the practice of being able to explain to folks, number one, we hear you. Number two, here's the reasons that cannot happen right now, and offer the opportunity to, like, how do you contribute? What could we do to maybe move that forward? Because more times than not, it's about money, right?
Yeah.
I want more training. I want to go to more conferences. I want an outing. I want a team outing, whatever those it's are. That's discretionary spend. And when companies are, wherever they are in their financial life cycle, I work at mid-sized companies, so a lot of times it's, I'm not having the 8-figure, 9-figure budgets to be able to deal with a team of 85,000 people. We have a smaller budget. What I try to instill in the team, not just the leaders of the functions, but every single person in the organization, is I try to help them understand how they contribute to the financial success and the extent of that success by the actions they take every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I engage them. So when you take 3 times as long to do this, this is what it means in dollars and cents. When you don't raise it that we have budgeted it incorrectly so we can change it systemically, that perpetuates, which means we have more revenue going away because it's taking us longer. So if they understand how that they can be active in that contribution of the success of the company, while they may not be getting what they want right now, A, they were heard, and B, they were invited to be part of the solution. And I think that's the important piece.
Yes, it is. And they might have options that you hadn't thought of, or they might have something to bring to it. And, you know, I always like to be more, I was going to say more transparent, but I would say as transparent as I possibly can. And probably maybe even a little bit more than the company might support with how are we getting to what's happening? What does it mean? What does the budget look like? How have we budgeted? You know, and how does your watch? And we're talking CRO side, right? Because I think that's a lot of where Charlene and I have experience, and it looks different on the pharma side or sponsor side. But on the CRO side, you only make money based on what you're doing, and by trying to do it faster than you thought that you would.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important for people to understand, you know, pay attention to what you're doing, and understand what the scope of your project is, and understand how and when to raise a question around the scope or around the budget, or if you don't understand what the outcome is, if you're having trouble navigating something. It's really important at all levels to raise that so that it can be addressed. And that ties directly to the financial performance of your department, of your group, of your company. And that's what will help open up some of the components that you're trying to access.
Yeah, it also gives people an opportunity to be innovative.
Mm-hmm.
How many times, Amanda, have we heard, well, that's just the way we do things?
Oh.
Which just drives me up a pole. So just
please don't ever tell me that, you know,
don't ever tell me, right?
There's so many problems with that's how we've always done it, which up to and including people who are new to the organization don't know that. And so
that's a whole other podcast, right?
That's a whole different topic. But, you know, that's not innovating, and that's not doing the best for anybody. No. It's not doing the best for the company. It's not doing the best for you as a person trying to do your job.
Yes, I and every leader in our company is expected to challenge people, particularly new people, to say, how can we do this better? Are we at peak efficiency? And I don't know that you ever get to peak efficiency, because I think it's a journey. I don't think it's a destination, right? And I want folks to embrace a different way of doing things that may not take as much time, may ensure higher quality, just the level of value that it brings because of the positive impact it has downstream to data management and biostats and writing and safety. Something happening at a site that we've addressed could have such a positive downstream effect. And that's how I want people to think. I want people to be excited to go, you know what? I'm not walking into just another place. I'm walking into an agent of change. And I have that capability to do that. It's just the leadership style that I think wins people and keeps people, engaged in the company and retained at the company.
So how do you tackle it when you've got, well, let me just back up for a second and say, I completely agree. And I value those organizations that are open to change and are willing to engage in some change management and transformational thinking and just, even being willing to hear out a new way of doing something. Organizations that have that mentality, or where that's how we've always done it, that you hear from multiple places, it tends to be pretty ingrained, right? If you're hearing one person say, well, that's not how we do things, that's one thing. But when you have, a dozen more people saying, well, this is how we've always done it, or that's not how we do things here, how do you work with those individuals and that mindset that can kind of become entrenched in a company?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of the reason that I accepted this job was because I saw the opportunity to have the right seat to be able to truly impact change from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, other jobs I impacted change from, in a portion of the life cycle. So part of the reason that I was so thrilled to have the opportunity to take this role. If I think about the places where, well, it's just easier to do, it's too much difficulty to make a change. Oh my gosh, we have all of this bureaucracy. I think it becomes either a personal choice where is the stumbling block? Is it what I'm referring to as an urban myth, right? This person said we can't. When I hear, well, quality said we couldn't, my next call is to quality.
Quality, of course. Right?
So my advice is, when you hear that, first of all, ask more questions. It's inefficient. Why do we keep doing this? Why we do it? Well, who says we have to continue to do that? Well, okay, my boss did. My next call is to the boss. I'm just trying to understand, right? And be very respectful when you're going to, because change is hard. And the human condition, right? Human nature is not to go, woohoo, let's go do something different today. There's far fewer of us out there than there are people who are like, you know what? This is tried and true. Why are you going to mess with it? I'm good, right? That's a fly by night or flash in the pan kind of innovation. I'm just going to stick to what's tried and true. And then I go back to, and I say, well, it's a good thing that we didn't say that, way back when the automobile first started, or when the telephone was, brought to light, all those, or the smartphone, or whatever these technology. You think about these innovations didn't happen in just one time. Something stuck, like there was glue. Larger companies, is it going to happen? I don't know. It's a groundswell. Can you formulate a group of people in a large organization to be that champions of change, if you will? And don't try to boil the ocean. Like, look at what you're trying to affect. Pick the one thing that's going to have the most ripple. It's going to have the biggest ripple effect. If you try to affect things out in the ripple, if you think about what a ripple does, when you drop a rock, it eventually just kind of dissipates. But if you drop a rock, that's a solid thing that's there. And if you can figure out one or two of those and then show meaningful change. And when I say show meaningful change, you're taking on the responsibility and the accountability to prove it, right? And proving it means tracking it, measuring it, whatever that it looks like. A lot of people want to do things different. If you want it to stick and you want someone to pay attention, prove that what you did was so much better.
I think this is where being statisticians really, comes into play. But I'm like, I've walked into organizations where there's, you don't want to just track metrics and KPIs, because why not? But if you have no idea how things are going, and you have no idea how long something is taking, or how well you're doing it, or, even what is the biggest thing that people are complaining about, right? You have to understand where you are, and then figure out ways to solve that, and then showing the change, right? And, the groundswell of support is something that I like to think about is who are the people who are open to different ways of thinking, and who are the people who are willing to pilot a new process or even develop a new process, and who are the people who are willing to have the conversations and use that to move the needle and start affecting some change through an organization. What skills do you think the next generation of biometrics leaders will need that maybe weren't a big deal for us early in our careers? And just so people know, when Charlene and I started working, we didn't have smartphones.
We didn't have email.
Data was collected on paper. We printed it. We had paper memos circulated in the office that we would go to our mailbox and check the information that was being given to us.
Interoffice envelopes, the interoffice
envelopes. We had binders of papers and CRFs hanging around. I mean, it was a completely different world. Yeah, I think there are some traits that you'll always be need. Mm-hmm. But what do we really think, people who are growing up today, it's a completely different world. So what do you think that they will need as they develop and mature into leaders?
Wow. I think you said it, in that there are some things that transcend generations, and that is that those qualities that you build around being a genuine, authentic person, living by example. If you want to be a leader, then you have to lead. It's not in title only. You have to find those things that seem to attract others as you're watching other leaders. Those listening skills, the compassion, the willingness to either step aside and let someone shine. I think that's one of the things that many new managers, new leaders struggle with, because of it's, again, giving things up. So I think those types of things will not change. I think what does change, and I think it's for as much as the current leadership that's here, like us, mm-hmm. and the new leaders coming in, is understand there is a generational difference. My boss and I were talking about this not too terribly long ago. I'm Gen X. Gen X is you work until it's done, right? And
you die and then you get it done. Yep.
And I cannot tell you how many all-nighters I pulled when I was a working manager, because it just had to be right and it was excellent and all this other stuff. I'm not seeing that behavior in the next generation, and that's not a bad thing. I think they can teach us something about balance. So they have learned, or they have adopted a way of life that is in better balance than maybe those of us were coming up in those days. And it's a pretty broad reaching statement. I know we still have folks who will churn, and we have folks that are our age who did somehow they did the well balance. I think if you look into how our teams operate now, there is an expectation that we take that into consideration when we work. What I would say to the younger generation is people still need help. Yeah, we are still in a life-saving, life-enhancing world. So what we have to do is figure out that equation to be able to bring in the right technologies, use it correctly, leverage the right data, and get to the answer faster than we were able to, because the tools are there now. We can't cut corners. We can't rely on someone else we have to make sure that we're still exercising our brains, that we're doing the critical thinking. One of the things I would beg anyone listening, do not let technology take over your critical thinking. I know it's easy. ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, pick your chatbot of choice. I know it's easy to want to rely on that. All they're doing is synthesizing the information faster. It's up to us to continue to be skeptical, to be curious, and to either validate or correct.
You would echo my own warning about AI. I think people think, will we even have biometrics teams in the future because of AI? And I always say, absolutely we will, because we're always going to be talking about patient data, and humans are unique creatures, and there's always going to be something that the machine cannot manage. But you do need to know how to use it and what the limits are. Mm-hmm. However, I also want to say, don't let it, as Charlene is saying, don't let it take away your critical thinking skills. I was reading something the other day, and it said, for most people, AI is doing simple things that they they're no longer thinking, and it's really to their detriment. Like, you no longer think about what you're writing in that email. You do a quick scan of what comes out of ChatGPT or Claude, and you go with it. You don't think critically through the issues and the messaging you're trying to get through, or you're not writing your own content. You're just letting AI churn out some information from you. And the critical thinking around the messaging you're trying to convey, or the problem you're trying to solve, or what is the idiosyncrasy around this data point, it is not something that AI is going to be able to effectively do. I really want to echo your be curious. I'm Gen X to the core. I'm very old Gen X, but like I cannot imagine not working. I cannot imagine not like working a lot if I have a job, because that's what you do. But I understand that's not the case for everybody. Still, people who want to grow into roles need to be curious and need to be willing to learn and need to be willing to talk to people and understand a lot more than just what's in your scope of role. Like Charlene and I both started out, as statisticians, right? And we've grown into roles that have encompassed so much more than just being responsible for statistics. And I know in my case, and I assume yours as well, is learning more about what's going on in the wider world of our industry, and what is that CRA doing, and what is that medical writer doing, and what is study startup doing, and what is regulatory doing, and what is data management doing, and understanding this to help you see a bigger picture, which automatically will make you think in a different way and start to develop your own strategy and process orientation, which is going to do you far more throughout the course of your career than simply keeping heads down on a single function.
I completely agree. And it's funny, as we're talking through this, it reminds me of the reason that I left statistics. And I tell people I left statistics for the good of my fellow statisticians, because I could not understand how in the world it was so hard to get clean data. It made no sense to me. So my curiosity and need to know moved me up to data management. And then I started seeing some things. And then my curiosity was, how hard could it be to put numbers in a form? Like, how hard could this be? And please remember, Amanda and I were still working in paper back then. How hard could it be? And so so I started asking. I needed to know, because I figured, my thought was, if we could collect the data correctly at the very beginning, the positive impact all the way downstream makes all of our jobs easier. So if you're sitting in statistics, or you're sitting in medical writing, or sitting in safety, or even data management, ask, what is it about this form that's just, what is it about the monitoring? What is it about the data collection? What does it make sense? How do we solve the problem at the root? And then your life becomes infinitely easier.
I think the 5 whys becomes a really helpful tool there, which is just asking why 5 times to get to the bottom of it, which is the 30-second spiel on that. There's much more to it. And the other thing I remind teams, and I even remind like senior leaders who have reported to me, is don't just get rooted in what you're trying to do the way you have to do it, right? There's processes. We're very process driven. We have to be in a regulatory environment, but don't just get lost in, well, this form has to be filled out, or we have to do this so that we can do that. Understand what the actual goal is, and then work with your peers and your counterparts in other departments to figure out how you guys can achieve the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's probably something that another department can do very simply to make your life 100 times easier if you're willing to talk about the goal. Right. Where if you're talking about, I need you to do this, then people are going to be like, well, they're likely to dig in their heels because they're very busy with their own responsibilities. But keeping goal focused, and what are we actually trying to achieve, and how can we achieve that within the constraints that we have, becomes a much more valuable skill than, always, making sure that I can't even think of the right example I want to say, but knowing how to collaborate across the functions to achieve the common goal is much more valuable than, knowing everything you can possibly know about your function.
No, and that's right. As a team, and that's within your function, across your functions and across your organization, you can be a results-driven organization, you can be a results-driven team, or you can be an activity-driven. Avania is a results-driven organization. We have a saying, if whatever I'm doing is not adding value to the ultimate result, stop doing it or change what you're doing. Because we're not going to do it just because.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because I had a really concrete example of somebody was trying to do something new, and so we've developed a form, and I had somebody else tell me, please no more forms, right? It's like, is the information the valuable piece, or is it the fact that we've generated a literal piece of paper to capture that value? And ask yourself, where's the value, and how are we collecting that value and transmitting that value up the chain? What advice would you give to your younger self just starting out?
This is not the first time someone's asked me that question. And I think my answer has evolved over time. I don't know that I would want my younger self not to go through what I've gone through. So I don't know that I would give them advice what to do or what not to do. I think the limited amount of advice I would give is be curious, be kind, be transparent, and be genuine. I think you have to learn. You have to make mistakes. I have children and grandchildren, and I watch my children parent their children. And there are days I sit and go, that is not how I raised you. My children learned. Mom's help was, let's sit down and put a plan together on how you're going to get yourself out of this. And I watch the help, right? We want to help. It is the hardest thing to be a parent and to tell your child, no, I'm not going to fix it for you. Yeah. And I think if I would, my younger self would not go through all these types of things, I wouldn't be the person I am. I wouldn't be the leader that I am today, because I had to make those failures. But if you keep those principles about being curious, kind, transparent, and genuine, that'll work.
I thought about this question myself, because I was like, what would I do if somebody asked me? And, my advice would be to relax.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell myself to relax. And not to say it's all going to work out, or nothing's going to, it all works out in the end. I mean, I agree. We are today the sum of all of our experiences, and to give advice that takes away those experiences doesn't serve us. I think it's the character traits, as you mentioned, that really become important to help us develop, and keeping those front and center go a long way in opening up the pathways and opening up the communication to really develop yourself as a leader. Last question is, what are you up to now? I mean, I know you have this fantastic new job, which you said it's been a year, and I cannot believe it's been a year already.
Almost. We're 6 weeks. 6 weeks from it being a year. I blinked.
Mind-boggling. It's been a year. But I'm sure you're settling in. So what's next on the horizon, and what interesting things are you up to?
So while I was semi-retired, I started a book, and months after joining my new full-time job, the book is finished. It was published in July, and the name of the book is Mindset Reimagined. And it is an invitation to personal disruption and reinvention of yourself. People ask me what the book is about. My short, kind of funny answer is, it's 100 pages to remind people to be nice to each other. The book actually was born out of what I felt like was becoming a complete intolerance for the hatred and divisiveness that I'm seeing. It doesn't matter if you open up social media, the news, it's everywhere. For every one piece of good story, one good story or one nice post, all you have to do is dig into the comments, and you 3 to 5 in, and you've got someone attacking people's character. You're an idiot. Why are you even on this planet? Like, I've seen it, and I don't know where that's coming. And I don't know where it's coming from. And all I can think of is that I am sure no parent raised their child not to be a nice person. Like, I can't imagine. I don't care what your religion, affiliation, I don't care what it is. I'm guessing people raise the intention is to be nice, but something has broken. So I decided that I would write a book and talking about being authentic and genuine, keeping that healthy skepticism. Um, Part of it was that as a leader, we don't always have to be on. I think about the pressures that leaders often have around feeling like they always have to be on. There's no room for being raw. And I talk about it being okay to be raw. I give an exercise called a time box method on how do you be raw, allow your brain to reset, because it's a physiological thing happening to you, and then move on. I mentioned the rock and ripple. I'm a big fan of that. That is root cause analysis 101, and it takes a lot of time. And then I talk about the cultural aspects of our world today, because it is massive, and what's our role in that? Which hills to die on? Like, everything doesn't have to be, uber charged and everything. Be critical of what hills you really choose to die on. And then, the art of conversation and communication. So those are the topics that I cover in the book. And it's nothing earth shattering. It's, in the introduction of the book will tell you how the book got started. It was, I do believe that the universe does send you signals throughout your life. And let's just say the universe was slapping me in the face relentlessly for a very short period of time. So I invite you all to take a look at it.
It's available at your favorite online bookseller.
It is. It's available at Goodreads and Amazon.com. It comes in electronic form, paperback or hardback. And thank you for asking about it. It was a bucket list thing, and I wrote it because I said if I could help one person, then I met the goal of doing what I wanted to do. And the reviews I've received so far tell me I've exceeded my goal.
Well, congratulations on that. And in fact, I remember sitting with you at lunch a year ago and you talking about, I'm going to write a book. And it's really, I can't believe I'm doing it, but I have no choice because the universe had said so. And
exactly.
And I think Charlene and I are both very open to what the universe might be plopping in front of us and what we should do. So that naturally made perfect sense to me.
Yes.
I want to thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to chat and share your leadership style and share some lessons. And I know you're very busy, and I appreciate it. For people who don't know, we're recording this. It's now 5:00 on a Friday afternoon. So I really admire Charlene's commitment to share her journey and her lessons with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity. This is what I live for. This being able to just share my stories, and hopefully they help a couple of people. That's what feeds my soul. So thank you for the opportunity.